What if everything you learned about the birth of civilization is wrong? What if the first cities weren't built in Mesopotamia, but thousands of miles away in India, thousands of years earlier? In 2001, marine scientists found something impossible off India's coast. Underwater structures, stone walls arranged in grids, like streets, like a city. They recovered pottery, tools, and carved beads from the ocean floor. Then came the carbon dating results. 9,500 years old. That's 7,500 BC. 4,000 years before we thought civilization existed anywhere on Earth. Every history book says civilization began in Mesopotamia around 3,500 BC. The Sumerians invented writing, built the first cities, created organized society. Egypt came next, with pyramids and pharaohs. This is the story we all learned, the story everyone agrees on. But what if it's incomplete? What if there's an older civilization hidden beneath India's seas? One that vanished when the Ice Age ended and oceans rose over 100 meters. One that left behind only fragments. Ruins we're just discovering. Myths we dismissed as fantasy. And a handful of cities along the Indus River that we thought were the beginning, but were actually the survivors. Because here's the real mystery. The Indus Valley civilization appeared around 2600 BC with sophisticated city planning, standardized measurements, a writing system, and long-distance trade networks. All seemingly overnight, as if the builders already knew exactly what they were doing, as if they'd done this before, somewhere else. I'm the ancientologist, and I spend my time uncovering the parts of history they don't teach in school. Today, we're exploring the evidence that India, not Mesopotamia, might be where civilization truly began. We'll look at the drowned cities beneath Indian waters, examine why the Indus Valley appeared so advanced so suddenly, and investigate myths that sound too much like historical memory to be coincidence. Hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to discover could rewrite human history. 1. The drowned cities. What lies beneath? Let's start with what's actually underwater, because the Gulf of Cambay discovery isn't alone. Up and down India's western coast, there are submerged structures, stone formations, and artifacts suggesting ancient cities lie beneath the waves. The Gulf of Cambay site is the most controversial. The 2001 survey found structures covering 9 square kilometers. Sonar showed geometric patterns, straight lines, right angles, what looked like streets arranged in grids. Divers brought up stone blocks, pottery, tools, and beads, all clearly made by humans. Carbon dating of wood trapped in the structures gave dates between 9,000 and 7,500 years old. That would make this older than any known civilization by thousands of years. Scientists immediately questioned the findings. Maybe the structures are natural rock formations. Maybe the artifacts washed down from rivers. Maybe the carbon dating is wrong. All reasonable doubts. But here's what they can't explain. The artifacts aren't scattered randomly. They're concentrated where the structures are. The pottery types don't match anything from nearby rivers. And multiple independent surveys confirm the structures are too regular to be natural. And Cambay isn't alone. Off Tamil Nadu's coast lies Pumpuhar, an ancient port mentioned in Tamil literature. The texts say the sea swallowed it. For centuries, people called this myth. Then in the 1990s, archaeologists found stone walls and harbor foundations offshore. The myth was memory. At Mahabalipuram, locals told stories of 7 great temples. 6 lost to the ocean, 1 remaining on shore. Everyone called it legend, until the 2004 tsunami briefly pulled the water back and exposed stone structures on the seabed. Temple ruins, foundation stones, carved blocks, visible for hours before the water returned. Then there's Dwarka, Krishna's legendary city. The Mahabharata describes it as a magnificent port with palaces and temples. When Krishna left, the text says, "The ocean rose and swallowed Dwarka." Marine archaeologists exploring waters off Gujarat found extensive underwater structures, stone walls, grid pattern foundations, heavy anchors, building materials. Carbon dating shows some structures are 9,000 years old, others 3,000 years old, suggesting the site was occupied for millennia, repeatedly flooded and rebuilt until the sea claimed it completely. Here's why this matters. At the end of the Ice Age around 12,000 years ago, sea levels were over 100 meters lower than today. India's coastline extended much farther. What's now underwater was fertile plains and river deltas, perfect for human settlement. As glaciers melted, oceans rose, gradually but unstoppably. Over thousands of years, coastlines retreated, villages flooded, towns drowned, cities disappeared beneath the waves. If people built settlements on those ancient coasts, and if some grew into cities, then India's earliest civilization wouldn't be in the Indus Valley. It would be underwater, in places we're only now beginning to explore. Now let's examine what we do know. The Indus Valley civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira. These cities are real, extensively excavated, and absolutely remarkable. They appeared around 2600 BC, displaying immediate sophistication. Streets in perfect grids, standardized brick sizes, advanced drainage systems, public baths, granaries, multi-story buildings. A level of organization that took Mesopotamia centuries to develop appeared in the Indus Valley fully formed. The cities had standardized weights and measures suggesting centralized administration. They had a writing system still undeciphered, but clearly used for record-keeping and trade. They had long-distance trade networks. Indus seals have been found in Mesopotamia dated to 2300 BC, proving they traded across the Arabian Sea. Their metalworking was advanced. Bronze tools, copper weapons, gold jewelry of stunning quality. They practiced intercropping, an agricultural technique where multiple crops grow in rotation. This maximizes yield while preserving soil. It's sustainable, ecological, and still used in India today, but supposedly invented by people who never farmed before? Here's the problem. Cities don't appear fully formed. Civilization is a gradual process. You start with villages, then towns, then small cities. Each stage takes centuries. You make mistakes, learn, and slowly develop complex systems. But Indus Valley cities appeared with advanced infrastructure already in place, as if the builders already knew what they were doing, as if they'd done this before somewhere else. What if they had? What if these cities were built by refugees fleeing rising seas? People abandoning coastal settlements as waters advanced, moving inland to the Indus and Saraswati river valleys, where they rebuilt using knowledge passed down from ancestors who'd been building cities for thousands of years. This explains the sudden appearance, the immediate sophistication, the lack of trial and error architecture. They weren't pioneers figuring it out. They were survivors applying existing knowledge to new locations. There's evidence supporting this. The Rig Veda, one of the world's oldest texts, describes a mighty river called the Saraswati. It calls it Mother of Waters, life-giving and crucial to civilization. For centuries, scholars thought this was mythology because no major river exists there today. Then satellite imagery and geological surveys revealed something. A dry riverbed running through Rajasthan and Gujarat, exactly where the Rig Veda said the Saraswati flowed. This river was real and massive. Around 2000 BC, it dried up from climate change and tectonic shifts. When the Saraswati died, cities along its banks died too. People abandoned them, migrating east toward the Ganges or south or west. The Indus Valley civilization didn't collapse from invasion. It collapsed from environmental catastrophe, the same way earlier coastal civilizations might have vanished beneath rising seas. 3. The myths, memory, or fantasy. Now let's examine India's myths, because they're full of details that sound disturbingly like history. Flood myths exist worldwide. Mesopotamia has Utnapishtim. Greece has Deucalion. The Bible has Noah. But India's version, the story of Manu, might predate them all. In the Shatapatha Brahmana, Manu finds a fish that speaks, warning him a great flood is coming. It tells him to build a boat. Manu obeys. The flood comes and drowns the earth. Only Manu survives. He becomes the father of the next age of humanity. This story appears in texts dated to 2000 BC, but the oral tradition is likely much older, and it describes exactly what geological evidence confirms. Massive flooding at the end of the Ice Age, sea levels rising over 100 meters, coastlines drowning, ancient settlements vanishing beneath waves. Then there's the Mahabharata, one of India's great epics. It describes wars fought with terrifying weapons. Brahmastra, arrows that shone brighter than 1,000 suns. Weapons that scorched cities, left earth barren, made waters boil. It describes flying machines called vimanas, vehicles that could travel through air. Some moved like birds, others like chariots glowing with fire. They rose with thunder and traveled vast distances in moments. To most scholars, this is poetry and metaphor, ancients expressing divine power through imagery. But the descriptions are oddly specific and technical. They describe sound, heat, blast effects on human bodies, details that feel less like poetry and more like observation. What if these aren't metaphors, but memories, distorted across thousands of years, dressed in religious language, but preserving actual events? Technologies that once existed were lost and survived only in stories? Consider how memory works. A civilization develops advanced technology. That civilization is destroyed. Survivors flee, carrying stories, but without context or understanding of the science. So they explain it through religion. Flying machines become divine chariots. Weapons become the wrath of gods. Knowledge is preserved, but transformed. This happens everywhere. The Tower of Babel might remember ziggurats. Noah's Ark might preserve memory of massive floods. Greek myths of Atlantis might recall actual drowned cities. Why should India's myths be different? 4. The evidence, what science shows. Let's look at what modern science tells us. Genetic studies of Indian populations show unique markers distinct from both Middle Eastern and East Asian populations, suggesting a long period of isolated development. But those same studies show something else. Around 10,000 years ago, there was significant population movement in India. People migrating and mixing, exactly when the Ice Age ended, when sea levels rose, when coastlines flooded. The Indus script remains undeciphered, but clearly isn't related to Sumerian or Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's its own system, suggesting independent development, not borrowing from Mesopotamia. Some researchers argue it isn't even writing, just symbols. But thousands of seals have been found with consistent symbols used for trade, administration, and record keeping. That's writing, even if we can't read it yet. Archaeological evidence shows sophisticated technology. The Indus people had standardized weights based on binary ratios: 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. They had uniform brick sizes across hundreds of kilometers, suggesting centralized standards. They had advanced drainage, with every house connected to covered sewers running under streets with inspection holes for maintenance. This level of urban planning didn't exist in Mesopotamia until much later. Egyptian cities never achieved it. Yet Indus people built it from the start. Either they were geniuses who figured it out immediately, or they were applying knowledge from somewhere else. Geological evidence confirms massive environmental changes. The Saraswati River dried up around 2000 BC. Sea levels rose dramatically between 12,000 and 6,000 years ago. Climate patterns shifted. Monsoons weakened. Rivers changed course. Any coastal civilization would have been devastated. Trade evidence shows Indus people were in contact with Mesopotamia by 2300 BC. Indus seals have been found in Ur, Babylon, and Dilmun, proving they had ships, navigation knowledge, and trade networks spanning thousands of kilometers. These don't develop overnight. 5. The timeline, rewriting history. So let's put this together. If the Gulf of Cambay dates are correct, if other submerged sites are equally old, then the timeline looks very different. 10,000 BC. The Ice Age ends. Sea levels start rising. Coastal India has thriving settlements, maybe even early cities. As waters advance, people adapt, building further inland, developing flood management, urban planning, and technologies to cope with rising seas. 7,000 BC. Major flooding events. Many coastal sites are abandoned. Knowledge is preserved and passed down. Communities continue further inland. The Saraswati River becomes the new center of civilization. 3000 BC. The Saraswati flows strong. Cities flourish along its banks. These eventually become the Indus Valley cities we know, but they're not the first. They're the latest in a long line. 2600 BC. The mature Harappan period. The Indus Valley civilization at its peak. Extensive trade, sophisticated urban planning, all the characteristics we associate with early civilization. But really, it's a civilization that's been developing for thousands of years. This is just when it peaks. 2000 BC. Climate change. The Saraswati dries up. Cities are abandoned. The civilization fragments. People migrate. Knowledge disperses, but doesn't disappear. It influences later cultures. The Vedic peoples, early Hinduism, Indian mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, all potentially carrying forward wisdom from an earlier age. If this timeline is accurate, then India wasn't influenced by Mesopotamia. It developed independently, possibly earlier, and the sudden appearance of Indus Valley cities wasn't sudden at all. It was the visible portion of a much longer story, most of which is now underwater. So what do we actually know? Ruins exist beneath India's coastal waters. Carbon dating suggests some are extremely old. The Indus Valley civilization appeared with suspiciously advanced technology. Indian myths describe floods, lost cities, and ancient technologies. Geological evidence confirms massive environmental changes at the end of the Ice Age. Mainstream archaeology remains skeptical. They argue underwater dates are unreliable, structures might be natural, and myths are just myths. And maybe they're right. Maybe it's all coincidence, natural formations, and religious allegory. But evidence keeps accumulating. More underwater sites discovered. More artifacts recovered. More myths aligning too closely with geological events. More technologies appearing too suddenly to have been invented from scratch. If civilization did start in India, if those drowned cities are real, then we need to rewrite history. Mesopotamia wasn't first. Egypt wasn't second. India was building cities while Europe was still in the Stone Age. Urban planning, writing, mathematics, and trade networks, all developing in India thousands of years before anywhere else. The ocean is patient. It erases, but also protects. Structures that would have weathered away on land are preserved underwater, frozen in time, waiting for us to develop the technology to find them, study them, and finally hear what they have to say. Maybe someday we'll decode the Indus script. Maybe we'll properly explore and date the submerged sites. Maybe we'll find proof that civilization began not in Mesopotamia, but in India. Or maybe we'll find something else entirely, something that challenges everything we thought we knew about human origins. Until then, the mystery remains, the ruins wait, and the question lingers. What if civilization didn't start where we think it did? What if India was first? What do you think? Could India have been humanity's first civilization? Drop your theory in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.